Hello there, this is Redjoy, and this is a new look at Paladins and their kits, including the Blackguard, for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. Paladins are one of those classes that have changed the most since the original conception of the Paladin in original D&D. I believe AD&D may have been the first edition to incorporate the Paladin, and Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, or Baldur's Gate in general, was kind of the first iteration of the Paladin. It's going to be very, very different from other Paladins that you might see in other games that you might play. Even as early as Neverwinter Nights, you see that Paladins are quite different. First and foremost, you have to be a human in order to be a Paladin in Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. Compare that to any other game, any race can be a Paladin, so that's going to be very different. Something else too is, and this change was the big change made with 5th edition, is that Paladins can be any alignment after 5th edition. I believe maybe 4th edition, I'm not sure, I'm not 100% familiar with it, but 5th edition, they could be pretty much any alignment. The logic is that the Paladin is a kind of a fighter with a purpose, with a specific oath that they have to fulfill, and that gives them divine abilities. Compare that to the Paladin from Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, or Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. It's going to be very different in the fact that they are required to be lawful good. And the idea is that they're specifically upholding a lawful good ethos when they use whatever abilities or whatever kind of concepts of who they are as a Paladin. So a Paladin is a warrior style class, right? It's very similar to the fighter in the fact that they can wear any armor, wear helmets, use any weapon, and they can use shields, and they're very similar in the role of a fighter, except they do have a couple of key differences. One of the big things that makes them different from a fighter is that eventually they will get divine spells, depending on what kit you choose. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And so that will allow for them to cast spells that will enhance their tankiness, that will enhance certain abilities that they have, and even do some debuffs against the enemy as needed. Paladins also get innate healing abilities, as well as protection from evil, and they get also bonuses to their saves. So ultimately, I would say that the Paladin has the role of being a little bit more tanky than a fighter does. Where they have the trade-off is the amount of damage they do. Now, a fighter is going to be able to become a Grand Master in weapons of their choice, whereas a Paladin is only limited to getting specialization in any weapons that they choose. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but basically it just means that they're going to be doing a little less consistent damage throughout, but they will have a little more weapon versatility, or the potential for more weapon versatility compared to a fighter. Well, now that we've looked at how different they are from fighters, let's go ahead and talk about the various kits. Now, you can play as a baseline Paladin and have a pretty good run. I think that they do a nice job of balancing a ton of things with everyday Paladins, but talking about their kits, you're going to find that their kits do a lot of extra things that give them additional capabilities. Let's start with the Cavalier. The Cavalier is probably one of my favorite kits, one of my favorite types of fighters or warriors in Baldur's Gate. They are kind of the romantic ideal of the knight. They are the ones who go forward, and they're the ones who are supposed to be the front line. I'm going to be the one who will lead the charge, right? They get a +3 bonus to hit and to damage against fiendish and draconic opponents. They get immunity to a ton of different things that impact the early game: charm, fear, poison, and cowardice or morale failure. They get resistances to fire and acid. That's pretty nice, and they can remove fear. That's all really good. The downside is that they can't use missile weapons. You can get around that in the base game just by using axes. So if you specialize in axes and you choose throwing axes, you can huck axes at a distance along with everybody else. But the main purpose of them is to go up to the front line. They have nothing to stop them at level 9 from casting Armor of Faith to give them a little bit of resistance, weapon resistance. And they are supposed to be up at the front. That's the whole point of the Cavalier. So they are probably one of my favorite kits because they have so many immunities, natural immunities, that make them really quite good. So if you haven't played as a Cavalier, give them a try. They are, in fact, I would say the Cavalier is probably my favorite Paladin kit. The others are really quite good in their own unique way, but the Cavalier does a really good job of being the ideal Paladin that you would want to see. Okay, so the next kit is the Inquisitor. Now, here's the thing. I have seen a lot of division on the Inquisitor, right? There are some people who post videos on YouTube that talk about how amazing the Inquisitor is, how just unstoppable the Inquisitor is, and then there are a few that would say they're not amazing, they're not the greatest thing ever, and I think it's really closer to the middle. Let's talk about the thing that drags them down. The big thing that drags them down is the fact that they can't cast divine spells. So when they hit level 9, they're not getting any divine spells, they don't get any ability to use any of the protection spells or anything like that. That's a bit of a bummer. That means that their tankiness is not going to be as solid, and they're already suffering from not being as raw damage or consistent damage, having as much consistent damage output as a fighter does. So you do have that going against you. However, the Inquisitor does get the benefit, first off, being immune to hold and charm, which means that they're going to do really, really well against a lot of opponents in the game that will hold you, that will charm you, right? Like Sirens at the beginning of Baldur's Gate 1, not really a problem, as long as you can protect against things like poison or, again, feeble mind, you'll be okay. But the two other big advantages is that they are, first off, they get Dispel Magic that works at twice their power level, and they get multiple uses every day, and it's cast incredibly quickly. So what happens is that let's say you have a level 2 Cavalier, right? That means they're casting Dispel Magic at level 4. And then obviously doubled. So like at level 15 is casting Dispel Magic at level 30. The way Dispel Magic works is I'm not going to go into the super specifics, but basically the higher level you are, the better chance you have at dispelling magic cast from opponents on the battlefield, right? So let's say you are trying to dispel Tarnish, right? And he is casting his spells at, I believe he's at level 5, right? And let's say you are also level 5, right? You're casting Dispel Magic at level 10 at that point. That means you're going to have a really good chance of dispelling his Mirror Image, any horror spells that he put up to cause your guys to go all running around. And that's going to let you just completely nullify any effects that he has. And that really, really destroys the magic capability that they have. Now it can backfire, right? Because if you cast Dispel Magic and you hit it on your own guys, you're also dispelling any positive effects that you casted on them. So haste, any positive illusion spells that you have, you're basically shutting down all magic with Dispel Magic. That's why Dispel Magic is one of those spells that gets, either people love it or they hate it, and I see the reason why people don't like it much. It's a very double-edged sword. But in the hands of an Inquisitor, if you want to shut down all magic, you have a really good chance of doing so just with the casting of Dispel Magic done at twice the level. That's very, very effective. The other ability they have is to use True Sight. They get that right at the onset of the game, and this allows them to be able to obviously cast True Sight really quickly, and it's a kind of an effect that stays up for a little bit. This is great for dispelling any illusions that come up, dispelling invisibility. So True Sight is great, especially in the early game and early part of Baldur's Gate 2. It falls off a little bit because what happens is thieves will get around this by using invisibility potions right in between when the True Sight spell hits off. I kind of described this when I talked about clerics, particularly priests of Helm. But what happens is that when you cast True Sight, you're triggering a True Sight pierce through all illusions, right? That happens once, And I believe it's like once a turn, it hits off and it dispels all illusions, right? Well, what happens if you're a thief, right? That spell, that initial bit casts off of True Sight, right? Dispelling your illusion, maybe you were hiding in shadows, right? Then, right afterwards, you drink Potion of Invisibility. And then you're back to being invisible again, right? And True Sight doesn't hit off until the next turn, so that thief is going to be able to backstab as need be. So you got to watch out for that. It is not, True Sight is a great spell, but it's not a cure-all spell, okay? So with that in mind, the Inquisitor is not a bad Paladin. I misspoke earlier in saying that they are a bad Paladin, but I don't think they're the super-powered godly Paladins that people hold them to be. They are very good at shutting down magic, but they don't quite get the ability to protect themselves like the other clerics do. Or, sorry, like the other Paladins do. So you need to watch out for that. Next is the Undead Hunter. The Undead Hunter is, as its name suggests, they're really good at shutting down the undead. I would say that the great thing about the Undead Hunter is it is powerful without being flashy, right? You get bonuses to hit the undead, and you get immunity to hold, which any opponent can hit you with, and level drain. I have a particular bias. I hate level drain. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It is one of the worst effects that I can imagine putting your character into. I would rather have a character imprisoned, right, than have level drain. That's how much I hate level drain. In return, they lose the ability to lay on hands. Okay, big whoop. You still get all the healing spells from divine casting that a normal paladin would get. So I would say that the Undead Hunter is it's not flashy, but it does what it needs to do. And I think that it is a great paladin kit if you're interested in really doing all sorts of things. There are tons of undead in this game. Tons of undead in this game. There are all throughout the entire game. So having an Undead Hunter is very, very good. I think that it's just amazing. So I really enjoy the Undead Hunter. Alright, so the last is the oddball of the Paladin kits, and that is the Blackguard. Blackguards are the evil Paladins. They are the Paladins that, instead of being lawful good, you're consigned to being any type of evil. They are immune to level drain and fear, which, like I said, I hate level drain, so that's nice. And fear is something that is very irritating. It's not quite the end of the world. I've had a lot of games, a lot of hardcore run-throughs where I've had my characters scared, and I would say about 2/3 of the time I'm fine. I'm running around, I'm annoyed at the fact that they are not, they're not able to do anything, but they snap out of it, and I'm usually able to get back into the fight. It's like a look over there kind of thing. So fear is not, being immune to fear is convenient. It's not game breaking though. They can turn undead the same level. By the way, paladins can turn undead at a slightly diminished level as clerics can. For the Blackguard, that means that they are going to be turning undead to make them allies, which I think is the worst form of undead. Turn undead, because guess what? If they're doing that, then an evil cleric can turn them right back. And since evil clerics are already going to be at a higher level than you, Blackguards, this is not a good tool for Blackguards to use, right? For a Paladin, I can kind of get it, especially if they're just going through an undead heavy area and they're using turn undead to kind of, clear off or, scare away undead, kind of weaker undead. Okay, cool. But for a Blackguard, I wouldn't bother using turn undead. Absorbing health, they can absorb health and they can poison their weapons. They're pretty nice. They get an aura of despair that causes not the enemy to really fear, except for maybe at higher levels, but it causes them to be weakened. That's kind of nice. It's not devastating, but it is enough to cause enemies to not be as powerful when they are hitting you, right? So it's almost a way of protecting yourself by weakening the enemy, by debuffing them. As mentioned, they're restricted to being evil. They can't detect evil. They can't use protection from evil, and they can't use lay on hands. those abilities are nice for Paladins to have. They are not essential. All of those, by the way, you can get with Divine Casting. So the Blackguards, they don't lose all that much. Not only that, but we're going to talk about alignment in just a second. But alignment, so the Blackguards are required to be evil, whereas a normal Paladin is required to be lawful good. Let's talk about alignment just for a quick second. So alignment for a Paladin is really important because for a Paladin, if they get a reputation that is too low, they will become fallen. If they're a fallen Paladin, then they're not going to be able to use any of their abilities. They will basically be a crappy version of a fighter, meaning they are locked in with only 2 points of specialization and for any weapons that they choose, and then they can't cast divine spells, they can't use any of their Paladin-based abilities, they don't get their bonus to saving throws, they lose a lot. So you don't want to fall as Paladin. You want to make sure you're doing good. If you're a Blackguard, none of that matters. You can have a reputation of 20. You could be a phenomenally wonderful human being and also be a lawful evil or chaotic evil Blackguard. You do whatever you want with the Blackguard. So that's a really big convenience factor for the Blackguard. But for a Paladin, you are limited to being a good character. Now for attributes, you're going to have a huge number of limitations and restrictions. The reason why you're going to run into these restrictions is because you have a lot of stats that require really high minimums. Charisma has a minimum of 17. The only thing you use Charisma for is to get really good rewards and good prices. Obviously, it kind of makes sense for the aspect of the Paladin being kind of this exemplar and kind of the shining warrior, the shining knight, right, yada yada. But it does create a major limitation for Paladins for the rest of their stats. Wisdom being 13, there's nothing that's impacted by having a high wisdom for a Paladin. They don't get extra priest spells, they don't get extra divine casting abilities. It's just, wisdom having an artificially high score of 13 was just one of those weird mechanics. Even strength has a minimum of 12. Now this one makes sense because all those physical stats, those are going to be the key things you want to put your points into. But you see that you have to make a lot of sacrifices as a Paladin. Now I took a long time to reroll and I got a pretty decent score of 92. But even then, I still can't put points to all the things I want to put points into, which are those physical stats. So you are going to probably, unless you rolled like a 94, you are going to be pretty limited on what your stats are going to be or your ability scores are going to be for a Paladin. The big one that you want, the biggest three, obviously are strength, dexterity, and constitution that you want to put points into. You don't need to put any points into the lower stats unless you really want to. Now, which ones do you want to prioritize? It kind of depends on how you're building your Paladin. I'd say constitution should definitely be 18. As far as strength and dexterity goes, if you're creating a more melee-based Paladin, like a Cavalier, definitely pop up strength and try to have the secondary value as high as possible, but again, you're going to be very limited trying to get as high of a roll as possible. I would put more points into strength than dexterity, and I'll tell you why. 2 reasons. One is that most of the time you are going to be in melee combat, where you will take a hit to AC, so you're going to have be more likely to take a hit, but you also want to be dishing out more melee damage. You're only going to be doing that if you have a decent strength score. The other reason why is that there are items that are more easily found that enhance your dexterity over your strength. So, and by the way, there are items that can give you high strength scores as well, but finding items that give you 18 dexterity, there's, for example, in Baldur's Gate 1, there's Paragontless you can find pretty much right away. Okay, not right away, but you have to go down to the Knoll Fortress that will give you dexterity 18. Pop those on, you get a little bit of an AC bonus to a character who doesn't have a high dexterity. If I wanted to, in this circumstance, I could lower this down to 8 and bring this up to 18. That's risky because one particular enemy that could hit in Baldur's Gate 2 is Mind Flayer. Mind Flayers, every time they hit, they drain 5 intelligence points. So if you have under 10, your paladin's going to go down, or your character's going to go down in 2 hits. If they have 11, it now takes 3 hits. So you have to kind of value what you're going to, how low you're going to make intelligence. Plus, intelligence impacts lore score, so it's going to be, it's nice to not have intelligence be too low on any character, but it's not super vital. So again, with a paladin, you're going to be looking for high physical scores, but you are also going to have high minimums for charisma and wisdom. And something else to note too is that you're going to notice that your total roll values are going to be higher in response to those minimums. If you were to create a character who was a fighter and they had a really, really high charisma, a moderately high wisdom, and a really high physical stat, that'd be a very, very impressive fighter. But because you're a paladin and you're balancing between all those various minimums, you don't have the option to lower your charisma or your wisdom to enhance your physical stats. So you just need to be aware of that when you're creating your character. So for skills, you are it's gonna look very similar to a fighter. The big difference is going to be that you can only put a maximum of 2 points into any various weapon, and that is the highest it will be able to go throughout the entire game. Now, that's not great for consistent damage, but what it does allow for your character, in fact, it forces your character to have a variety of different weapons that they are skilled in. For example, let's say you want to go two-handed swords, right? You go two-handed swords, that's going to be the maximum, right? So next choice you might want to do is two-handed weapon style, bada bing, bada boom. Now your character is specialized, getting a -2 to speed factor, getting a bonus to critical hits, and getting a +1 to damage roll. Holy crow, this guy is phenomenal, or this gal is phenomenal in melee combat with two-handed swords. Okay, that's really good, but that's the highest that she's going to be able to go into, right? Then maybe at level 6, you might want to level 4, where she gets another point into weapons. Maybe she wants to put a point into crossbows or longbows in order to give her a missile option. That's an option too, right? Or if I want to start specializing in other weapons such as daggers or maybe flails, right, to give a bludgeoning option, that I would be forced to make that choice, and it kind of forces a paladin as well as a ranger to have versatility in different weapons and being specialized in a number of different weapons. So yes, in the terms of raw damage, it is not as good as a fighter will be. However, it will allow for the paladin and the ranger to use a wider variety of different weapons in order to be successful, and as they're picking up those different weapons, they can use all sorts of different weapons and use those different weapons throughout the entire game, right? If you, for example, find a really good flail that you really want to use, you can immediately, or you can put points into it as soon as you can, in order to be able to really access using that magical flail as soon as you can. Whereas a fighter, if you're stuck going out, let's say you want to do the same thing with a fighter, and you want to just continue putting points into two-handed swords, and you get up to 5 points of two-handed swords, you're pretty much dedicated to using two-handed swords throughout the entire game. You're not going to have the flexibility to use other weapons as you see fit, or at least any weapons with proficiency, unless you sacrifice a little bit of effectiveness in that one weapon that you became a Grand Master in to choose another weapon. So that is, I would say, an advantage or a trade-off that Paladins and Rangers get when they are limited to only specializing in weapons versus becoming a Grand Master in weapons. Again, you're not going to do as much physical damage. That's not the point of a Paladin or a Ranger. The point of the Paladin and Ranger is to have a wide variety of different things that they can do, and to also use divine casting as need be. So I think it's a pretty interesting trade-off. I'll let you decide if you think it's worth it. So I think that just about covers it for Paladins. Paladins have a lot of different little abilities they can do to enhance the entire group, to enhance themselves, to make themselves very, very good in combat, and to make sure that they can keep their faces pretty. And keeping their faces pretty is a very important factor of being a paladin. Your charisma score is high for a reason. You will most likely be the face of your party if you end up creating a paladin. That means you're going to end up talking to people, you're going to end up being their friends, and you will most likely have a lot of additional charisma-based advantages that are very low level or low key in the game. Better rewards, lower prices, things like that. Also, party cohesion. I think it hasn't been necessarily proven in the code, but I think that there is a theory out there, and I agree with it, that says that parties are less likely to have infighting between the NPCs or the companions that might join in the party if your character has high charisma. So, incidentally, if you have a paladin and you have two characters or two companions that are likely to hate each other, they're less likely to fight because you are a paladin and you have that natural charisma of 17. Just something to think about. So I hope you enjoyed this guide about paladins. I think paladins in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are a bit more restrictive than they are in other Dungeons & Dragons games, but ultimately that restriction comes with a unique role that they play and a unique challenge that they present in playing the game as they see fit. They have their own set of quests that they do in Baldur's Gate 2. They have unique items that only paladins can use. I think that they are really quite a phenomenal class to play. They're a lot of fun, especially the kits of paladins. You know, I talked about the trade-offs between the various kits, but I think all of them are worth giving a try. Even the Inquisitor, even the Blackguard, especially the Undead Hunter, and really especially the Cavalier. I think those are really fantastic classes to play. Really, every time I've seen a paladin play, I've always been interested in how they turn out, because people just have a lot of fun in playing as a paladin, and I think you will too. So, with that said, give them a try, and until next time, take care and good luck. We're all counting on you.